Good afternoon, ladies and gents. Welcome to this short Lunch and Learn webinar introducing DesignBuilder's latest approved UK certification tools. I'm Dave Cocking and I'll be joined a bit later by Dr. Andy Tyndale, DesignBuilder's Managing Director. I'll start today by very briefly highlighting what DesignBuilder is, what it can do, and then briefly introduce the key new features. Most of the time today will be focused on showing you the software updates in the latest approved SBEM and DSM interface. And I'll try to provide you with a few top tips relating to the new functionality as I go. After that, I'll point out some of the new non-domestic EPC conventions and where you can find more information on how to handle those in DesignBuilder. And finally, we'll take some time to answer questions at the end. We expect the webinar to last no more than an hour, including questions. You can submit questions at any point during the webinar via the questions box in the control panel. This webinar is being recorded, so you will be able to access it later if you want to recap on any of today's discussion points. You'll receive an email with a link to the recording in the next day or so. So here's a quick overview of the content from today. Start with an overview, summary of key new features. Most of the time will be spent live in the software, and then we'll talk through the conventions with some Q&A at the end. So what actually is DesignBuilder? It's a graphical user interface, and it's been designed to provide a very fast and easy way to input data into calculation engines like Energy Plus for dynamic simulation, Radiance for daylighting, and SBEM for UK certification. We also use the Energy Plus engine to run the DSM UK certification calculations and other calculations like the TM52, TM59 overheating analyses, which aren't so heavily constrained by the UK National Calculation Methodology, or the NCM. And we also use Energy Plus to run full dynamic simulations for non-NCM design modeling purposes. Whilst most of you will be familiar with DesignBuilder's UK SBEM and DSM tools, you might not actually realise just how much more DesignBuilder can do for you to open up new business revenue streams. So we'll just very quickly take a canter through this graphic. You can use DesignBuilder to do all of the stuff that you can see on the screen. So you build that one core model for certification purposes, and then you can do a whole range of other stuff as well. So we can use Energy Plus to do the dynamic energy and comfort simulations, and that enables you to accurately predict or model performance in new and existing buildings, as opposed to the more kind of benchmark NCM type modeling. The latest TM52 and TM59 tools to undertake overheating analysis for Part L, London Plan, BREEAM, BB 101, etc. You can also generate credits for environmental schemes such as LEED and BREEAM. You can simulate detailed HVAC system performance. You can size heating and cooling systems. You can do cost modeling and advanced cost benefit analysis. There's also other engines behind the interface, such as Radiance and a CFD engine, and these are fully integrated, so that with that one model you can just literally switch modes and run a variety of different types of calculations. For the rest of the webinar, I'm going to focus on the latest improvements in our UK and DSM certification tools. There are too many improvements in version 5.4 to mention them all, but these are the ones we think that most people will probably find most useful. We now have a single approved SBEM and DSM version in England, Scotland and Wales, and that version is also approved for SBEM use in Northern Ireland. That makes it even easier to switch between SBEM and DSM calculations to see which engine will actually give you the best rating under different circumstances. Many of our customers are now doing MES work for their clients, and they've found that whilst DSM generally provides a better rating due to more accurate and detailed calculations, that isn't actually always the case. Occasionally, the simplifications of the SBEM engine result in a better rating. So DesignBuilder's unique ability to quickly check this has been really well received by those of you out there doing the MES type work. If you want to find out more about DesignBuilder for MES, we're planning another lunchtime webinar on that topic on the 7th of September. And we're also going to run a low-cost one-day course, which we've currently got scheduled for the 17th of October. You'll hear more about both of those in our newsletters over the next month, so do keep an eye out if that interests you. DesignBuilder 5.4 also includes the latest NCM library with its associated improvements in areas like LED performance and the latest version of the SBEM engine. Enough for PowerPoint, so let's now take a look at the software. Okay. Given this webinar is an overview of the latest new tools to help you get the most from the software, rather than a full introduction to DesignBuilder, I felt it wasn't really necessary to show you how to create the model. So I'm just going to focus on showing you some of the new features in this model that I've already created, kind of Blue Peter style. There are plenty of free tutorials and webinars available on the website if you aren't familiar with DesignBuilder yet and you want to find out more about how models are actually created. So this model itself is a fairly typical modern small to medium size office building designed for reasonable levels of daylight, utilizing natural ventilation, and it has a VRF heating and cooling system. I'm not intending to kind of go through all of the model data or anything in any detail. We'll just focus on the specific latest new things that we want to show you. As you can see from the icon here in the top right, this model is currently in the SBEM analysis mode. I'll show you a little later how you can switch to DSM and Energy Plus modes to access the whole range of functionality from the model that you've already built. So let's now take a look at some of the functionality that I mentioned earlier. Before I show you the main new geometry tools, I'm going to show you a neat shortcut that will hopefully help you create and edit geometry even faster in DesignBuilder. So it's now easier to navigate to a particular surface that's hidden behind another. For example, if you wanted to navigate to an internal partition, if I go to just take a quick look. So this is the ground floor layout. Comprising of 3 zones, the central zone being a reception there and the other 2 being offices. So there's one reception, and all of the other zones in this building are currently offices. If I go to let's say zone 3 on the ground floor, so I can see here that this is the east surface of that block, and we have 2 external walls, and there's an interzone partition that connects this office to the reception. If I want to access that and I just click here, then what I'm actually doing is clicking onto the ceiling surface of the zone. If I want to actually go directly to that partition wall, all I need to do is press and hold the shift key and then click, and voila, I can go straight to that particular partition. If I want to actually navigate to it, then I just double click and I go straight to that partition, as you can see there. So we press and hold the shift key to allow us to access something which was otherwise hidden. Okay, we have actually included a list of shortcuts like this in an appendix at the back of the latest SBEM and DSM manuals, which we hope you will like. Now on to some of the new tools. There is a new tool called Ghost Selected Blocks, and that allows you to view and navigate to the surfaces of blocks that are hidden by other blocks. In this model, for example, I could ghost this first floor west block, and I do that by first selecting the block, click it once to turn it pink, and then hopefully you can see this new toolbar icon here, Ghost Selected Blocks. If I click that, then you see a ghosted outline of the block itself. And then if I click, for example, if I wanted to access this this block underneath, whereas before I just click to navigate directly to the area underneath. There's also a new display tool. If I go to block or zone level, I can view surrounding blocks and zones in wireframe form. So if I'm going to go back here to the to this ground floor block, and you can see another new icon here, surrounding block zone display. So if I navigate to, let's say, go to the reception of that block and switch that on, then I can see the reception zone in the context of the other zones in the block. If I'm at block level and I switch that on, then I can see the whole block in the context of other blocks, which is quite useful for orientating yourself, especially in larger, more complex models. So we're now going to take a look at new tools that make it easier to draw partitions without affecting your glazing. So in previous versions, if you had glazing that had been customized and you drew a partition so that it intersected the glazing that you'd already drawn, then that partition would either delete the window. You'd then need to draw the glazing either side of the partition. You can now draw partitions through windows that you've already added to surfaces, so that the glazing on customized surfaces remains intact when the internal geometry changes. So to show you that, if I go back to building level, in fact, if I go to this, the first floor east block here, in fact, before I do that, I'll just unghost that previous block. If I go to the first floor east block, and I will modify the glazing in this zone. I'm going to try and modify the glazing on this east surface, so I can use the little trick that, or the shortcut that I just showed you a few minutes ago. If I press and hold the shift key, I can navigate directly to that eastern facade, double click on it to access the facade. If I want to modify that surface and add glazing, remove the existing openings, I'm just going to deselect the keep default openings, and then as soon as I click on the draw window tool, then I'll just go to that surface, and I'm just going to draw a long window that pretty much runs the full length of that facade. I'm now going to go back to the block level. For those that haven't or aren't aware of this, you can you don't just have to use the navigator or double clicking in the layout, the edit tab. You can also use this this string of text at the top. So if I want to go back to block level, I can click on L1 East there, and now at block level I can add my partitions. I'm just going to switch off the surrounding block zone display there, and I'm going to add a partition. Basically draw one that splits this zone in half to create two zones. And straight away you should notice that my glazing here on the east facade hasn't been removed. In fact, if I orbit my model there, you can see all that's happened is that the glazing has split either side of the partition, so it hopefully makes editing and updating models that much easier and faster. Okay, so back to my axonometric view. So the next thing I'm going to do is to show you how to import a 2D drawing file to help you create geometry, or perhaps to draw openings onto facades that you've already created. So I'll first import a simple two-story facade DXF, and you can see it's imported it on the ground plane there. So I can simply click on that, and if I right click there and select the move option, I can pick up this DXF snap point here, pick up my DXF and use the snap point at the at this northwest corner of my building, and attach my DXF plan to that facade. And you weren't previously able to do that in earlier versions, and I think many of you will be really pleased to see this. So the idea now is that I can use my facade DXF to help me add openings, doors, windows, etc. onto my surfaces at surface level. If I go to, let's say, my it's on the western side, it's this zone 3. I'll go to that western facade on the ground floor here, 270 degrees, and I can't see my DXF plan. By default, that's switched off. So I need to go to model options and switch that viewing option on. If I go to the display tab here, and then this option, show imported 2D drawing at zone and surface level, switch that on, click OK, and now I can see my DXF with its openings on the facade. My keep default openings is unchecked, so I can now click on my draw window and start merrily adding my glazing using the DXF snaps. And hopefully you're aware, but if not, I can clone at the surface level. If I want to multi-copy, press and hold the shift key, the control key, and then right click, clone, pick up that snap point and just drop that onto the remaining surfaces. Press the escape key and there you go. If I go back to building level, we can also clone openings from one surface onto other surfaces. If we want to, we could move the DXF onto other surfaces if we wanted to. I'm going to remove the DXF at this point because I want to copy some of the windows at building level. So just go to edit, remove DXF data, and I'm just going to pick up, I don't know, let's say three of these openings and clone those, and I could copy these now onto any of the other relevant surfaces in the model. What I'm going to do is just actually drop them onto the roof on the top, so I can copy from one facade onto other surfaces. Okay, so going now to talk briefly about constructions and semi-exterior adjacencies. This is a relatively subtle improvement, but again, one that we think many of you will be very pleased to see. The way that semi-exterior unconditioned adjacencies are modelled in DesignBuilder has been substantially simplified. There was previously in model options an option to model semi-exterior unconditioned zones as simple R values. Well, that option's now been removed, and all semi-exterior zones are now modelled simply by setting the zone type in the activity tab as semi-exterior unconditioned, or when you create the roof block or something, then you set that at that point in your SBEM or DSM model. In both the SBEM and DSM interfaces, the full semi-exterior roof thermal properties are defined now here by the semi-exposed ceiling. So you specify all of the layers in that semi-exposed roof construction using that, and that's what's used in the calculation for both SBEM and DSM. Okay, so editing openings. In this latest version, you can now edit openings at both building and surface level. So openings can be resized without having to delete and redraw them. What I'm going to show you now is explained in the help file, and you might want to have a quick look at that just to help you clarify what you can and can't do with this tool. But I'll very briefly show you. If I select, say, this particular opening here, once I've selected the opening, then I have a variety of edit tools available at the top. In this case, I might want to stretch that particular window. So once I click on that, now you can see we've got these little nodes once the edit tool's been selected. I can left click on any of those nodes, left click once. Oops, it might help if I actually clicked on it. Left click once, And then if I release my finger from the left click, move the node to where I want to position it, and then left click again to confirm the dimensions and resize the opening, and then I can just press the escape key. So nice, simple tools to help you resize one or multiple openings on surfaces. Okay, on to lighting improvements. So I'm at building level, going to the lighting tab. The latest version of the NCM, which is included in this version of DesignBuilder, includes improved LED performance data. And it's hidden in the background for this this unknown lighting option, but it gives substantial performance improvements for side lit buildings. That improvement is almost 100%, and for top lit buildings, the performance is increased by around 50% on previous versions of the NCM. So you can get a significantly better rating in both SBEM and DSM in this version compared to previous versions if your building has a lot of LED lighting. DesignBuilder includes the option to specify the efficacy value of the luminaire rather than that of the lamp. So it enables higher efficacies to be input for LEDs when using the chosen option. So if I go to the chosen option there, let's assume that this lamp and ballast efficacy is for the whole luminaire efficacy. In that case, all I would do would be to set that the light output ratio, set it to 1 to reflect the fact that there is no reduction from the from this value that I've put here. Okay. Now on to QA checking. There is a new way to QA check your model data. From the tools menu here, I have this model data grid view. And this allows the building model data to be viewed in a grid, as the name suggests. And that can be used instead of, or perhaps to supplement, your existing QA method. At the moment, this tool is read-only, but we expect to release a fully editable and more comprehensive version of it later this year. So you can select from a range of templates, and what you see in the grid will depend to some extent on which analysis mode you're in, whether you've switched to SBEM or DSM or Energy Plus. Here, if I select the zone activities template option, it will display all of the primary data related to activities, which obviously for NCM calculations is relatively simple. But nonetheless, it still gives me some really useful data. And we can see here that you can see the zone floor areas, you can see the zone volumes. Perhaps most importantly, you can see which activity template is selected for all of the zones in the building, and straight away you can see which of those is not inherited data. And it uses that standard DesignBuilder convention of blue data is inherited and red data is something that you've changed, not inherited data. So if we take, you can also see which zones are included in your model. So some very useful summary information, and it's great to be able to see it all in one simple grid like this. I deliberately set a different construction template on the reception zone. So if I select this surface construction summary, I think this will give you an idea of how useful this tool is right now, but also how useful it could be when it's enhanced more. If I just scroll down, this is obviously there's much more data here, so it's more difficult in some respects just to pick up stuff. But if I scroll all the way down, you can see, even though that the construction template name is almost identical, actually I can see it's different straight away because it's showing as red. It's not inherited data, it's something that I've changed. So hopefully you can see that viewing the model data in this grid view makes comparisons between the settings for different parts of the model so much easier. Okay, so that's all the information that applies to both SBEM and DSM, or a lot of the specific model data stuff that applies to both. I'm going to now switch briefly to DSM, and we'll take a look at some of the specific options relative to DSM that are new in this version before we move on to discuss things like the non-domestic EPC conventions. So we released our first approved DSM tools early last year, and we've taken on board your feedback on the things that you thought could and should be improved. Many of those improvements are included in this latest release. So I'll run through the DSM specific ones now. So to switch from SBEM to DSM, you can see the little icon up in the top right. We do this via program options, and I can go straight to program options by clicking on the analysis type icon there, and that will take me to program options, and I can simply then switch to, it might be Energy Plus if I want to do design modeling, or if I want to do overheating calculations, TM52, TM59. In this case, I just want to show you some of the DSM improvements, so I shall select the DSM option and click OK. And now you should be able to see in the top right hand corner that the DSM analysis icon is displayed. Always useful actually to check that you're in the right analysis mode when you start switching between the two. So we'll take a quick look now at some of the new functionality related specifically to DSM. So if I go to the constructions tab, and if I open up the thermal bridging header here, you can see that in DSM this thermal bridging tick box is labeled use psi values, and this is because the default setting in DSM is not to use psi values. The very pessimistic NCM values, but there is another option allowable, which is to assume that thermal bridging adds a further 10% to the area thermal transmittance. So that has become now the default option for DSM, but you can, of course, as you could before, switch on the psi value option if you wish to use that. And obviously, if you modify any of these values, then you have to be using accredited site values. On to openings. This latest version allows a greater degree of control over window shading devices, such as blinds. So we've now got this this new slat angle control type. So that means in addition to the fixed slat angle, you can now also model the effects of changing slat angles, either using a schedule or using the solar data, which DesignBuilder will read from the hourly weather file. You can find more information on this input and any of the other data inputs like this for Energy Plus in the help file. In the HVAC tab, if I go to the domestic hot water option, if I just open up the edit tab to domestic hot water, you now have the ability to specify the storage losses either in megajoules per month, which has historically been available to you, but you also now have the ability to specify that loss in kilowatt hours per day, which for many of you will be just means that you don't have to start calculating this, because you quite often have the kilowatt hours per day data provided from the manufacturer. So hopefully you will like that. Something which isn't necessarily new, but I want to very briefly show you it, because a number of our customers don't seem to realize it's available to them. It's this load data from template tool. So I'm just going to click on this load data from template icon up here in the toolbar. This can massively speed up the data input process, and it can be used in a number of different ways. I don't have time to explain it all, and you can find out more in the help file, but I'll discuss a couple of its uses to give you a sense of how you could use it to help you. Firstly, if you consider like zones like WCs in large buildings, for example, these always have the same NCM activity, and they often also have the same glazing type and lighting systems too. So what you can do is you can select, let's say, a specific activity type. So if I'm in an airport building or a very large office or a hospital or something, it might have tens or even hundreds of WCs. So I'm going to apply a number of different data inputs in one hit using this tool to all of the toilets. So I'm going to set all the activities to toilet. Perhaps I've got a specific type of glazing. I'm not going to worry about being choosy about what glazing I select. Just want to show you the process. So I'll just apply a certain type of glazing, and maybe that all of those toilets have I don't know, maybe compact fluorescent lighting, which is fairly typical for things like toilet zones. Once I've set which data I want, if I go to this target tab, then I've got this little these options here that allow me to select which areas of my building, and again it uses the normal data inheritance methods in DesignBuilder. So I could load something for the whole building, or I could select individual blocks, or I could load it into zones or drill down further into surfaces and openings. But in this case, I might just want to, let's assume that my first floor east block, this zone 1, is a WC. So I'm going to load all of that data that I've just set here, but only load it into my WC zone. And for a big building, I might pick up 20, 30 or more of these in this list. And I'm going to set the activity type, the glazing type, and the lighting data. Click OK. And at building level, I can see that my the activity is still set. In fact, if I go to the block that I've loaded the data into, at block level, it's still inheriting from the building level. But if I go to zone 1, then I've now got a toilet, and my I've got the reference glazing, and I've also got the fluorescent complex. So that's lighting. That's one way of using this tool. And another way of using it, which a lot of people find really useful, is when you're inputting a lot of data for things like, sorry, I don't really want to go to model options. I want to go back to the load data from template option. When you're applying a lot of data to individual components, like perhaps to individual windows, you might want to add certain glazing types on different facades, or perhaps shading systems, and we can do that really effectively as well using this tool. So if I go to my glazing input here, click here, and let's say I want to load double glazing with a 1 meter overhang. I'm going to choose 1 meter overhang so that you can see it really clearly in the layout edit tab once I've loaded it. So I'm going to set that 1 meter overhang. Obviously, overhangs like this apply to DSM, but they don't apply to SBEM. SBEM can't see anything beyond the thermal envelope of the building. So what I'm showing you here, the concept would still work for things like the glazing type would change, but the shading option wouldn't be relevant. I don't want to load that to those shading devices to any of the building or the blocks or zones in the way that I did before. So I'm going to make sure that all of these options are unchecked, and I'm going to use this little selection filter tool here, and I'm going to apply that data to openings on the external wall, and it's a shading device. So what I'm going to do is apply that to any facade or any of the openings that have an orientation 30 degrees either side of south, so from 150 through to 210 degrees. And if I click on OK, I know I've got my orientation 150 through 210. Click OK. I've unchecked all of that, and I'm just going to apply this data. Click OK again, and if I go back to my layout tab, you can see hopefully fairly clearly here that we now have these shading devices. And if I navigate to one of those windows as well, you'll see that it's got the clear double glazing. So really neat tool, hopefully can save you a whole load of time. Okay, I'm just going to very briefly talk a bit about our SBEM and DSM manuals. So the information that we've reviewed today is explained in the help file, and in the SBEM and DSM manuals where appropriate. Please make sure that you've read the updates in the manuals before you create certification models and lodge any certificates. We do send out a newsletter for new approvals, and that always gives you a link to the latest version of the manual, which so hopefully you're aware of them and intimately familiar with them. So the way that all this kind of hangs together is the help file and the tutorials include all of the fundamental modeling information, and that's relevant to all forms of modeling. So for example, instructions on how to use the geometry tools. The SBEM manual then includes the fundamentals specific to the UK certification interface. That includes all of the information you need for SBEM, and much of that also applies to DSM. The DSM manual provides DSM specific information in addition to the certification information provided in the SBEM manual. The new and improved functionality that I've just reviewed is flagged up as new or updated content, and it's summarized in the latest manuals. So if let's say I open up the SBEM manual here, let's just maximize that. Okay, in Appendix 2, I mentioned earlier DesignBuilder keyboard shortcuts, so you can see a list of shortcuts there at the end of the document. But you'll also see, as I scroll through, in fact, if I just set that, it'd be easier to see. You can see these little flags in here. So we've put these flags in. It's consistent with the way that the ISBEM manuals work. So you don't need to read the whole document every time that that we release a new approved version. You can just quickly scan through the manual just to see where you've got these little red flags, such as further guidance and new functionality. So that's the SBEM manual and the DSM manual. There's a new appendix in there if you haven't seen it already. Obviously there is DSM can in some circumstances use different data to SBEM, so we've provided a checklist for you to quickly check and have a look through when you're converting between DSM and SBEM, just to make sure that you've picked up and you make any edits that you need to in the different analysis types that you're using. So that's the manuals, and I'm going to go back now to the just to the PowerPoint briefly and talk very briefly about the latest non-domestic EPC conventions. I'll start with a mention of the zone height convention. This one isn't new information, but we know it's caused some confusion, especially with new customers who've been using other commercial tools and may have done things slightly differently in those tools. Both the SBEM and DSM manuals explain how you model zone height to comply with the conventions in DesignBuilder. And they clearly state that internal voids are not to be included, as you can see in this extract from the conventions here. So the zone height is the top of floor to the top of floor for intermediate zones, as it's shown in the slide. And there are some more items in the DesignBuilder knowledge base, such as the latest guidance on setting up models to meet the new domestic hot water system requirements, how to set up the office in warehouse to meet the latest conventions. I don't have time to go into those in detail now, but there are items in the knowledge base that you'll find really useful, so you can access that, as you can see from this this screen here, from the support drop-down menu from the DesignBuilder website. So thank you for listening today. That's the end of our formal presentation, but we'll stay live for another 10 minutes or so.